When I first got into high school, I got into trouble a few times, and I ended up skipping school regularly. I would stay at home and watch TV or play games. I used to take care of my younger brother a lot too. At night, I used to go out skateboarding or go over a friend's house to play more games. I probably wasn't the best babysitter. I just left him to his own devices most of the time. One evening, I was having dinner with my little bro, and we were both watching TV together. I should mention that my mother was in and out of the hospital at the time. I guess that was maybe why I was acting out at school. Every night it was just me and my little brother, since my dad worked late. After he finished eating, he said suddenly, "Oh yeah, the phone. I need the phone." My younger brother was 4 years old, by the way. "Hey, what are you talking about?" "I need the phone," he kept repeating while running off. Our home phone was in the hallway, and he ran in that direction. I was confused, so I went after him. He was trying to reach the phone on the phone table in the hallway. He was on his tiptoes and he nearly had it. He was whining and asking for the phone. "No, you can't play with that. Who are you going to call anyway? Are you trying to speak to Mum? She's not coming back from the hospital yet." He started to cry and he shouted at me to hurry up and give him the phone. I had to pick him up and drag him back to the living room, kicking and screaming. He really wanted that phone. Just then the phone began to ring. The second my brother heard it, he started struggling against me, more and more, screaming about how it was his phone, etc. I said, "Just wait there, I'll go get the phone for you because you can't reach it." He suddenly stopped his tantrum, and then waited patiently for me to bring him the phone. It was pretty weird, but it was about to get a whole lot weirder. "Hello?" I said as I answered the phone. I will keep my brother's name anonymous just in case. Yeah, can I speak to Thomas, please?" The voice belonged to an older woman, in about her 50s, I'd say. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It was really strange. I wondered what the hell a stranger in their 50s would want to speak to a 4-year-old about. "Who's calling?" I asked.
Just a friend."
"Huh? A friend?" I hung up. I was really confused. I walked back into the lounge and I saw my little brother sat there, on the sofa, grinning at me. "Did you give our number to some old lady?" I asked him. He said nothing. "How long have you been speaking to this old lady?" Then he said, "I don't understand, I don't know, I hate this." I walked back to the phone and checked the caller ID for the number. It was our area code, but I didn't recognize the number. I tried to call it back a few times, but every time I tried, the line was busy. Meanwhile, my mum came home from the hospital, and I explained what had happened. Mum looked pretty freaked out. She was just as unaware of this as I was. From that day onwards, we got calls from that number every now and then. It was so weird. Anytime my parents went out, about 2 minutes later, the phone would ring. My little brother would start shouting and screaming for the phone, and then, when I answered, the old lady hung up. Whenever I called back, the line was always engaged. I moved the phone to a really high place that only I could reach when I was stood on a stool. I didn't want that horrible voice speaking to my brother again. A few weeks later, I had used the phone to speak to the police about the old lady and the nuisance calls. Once again, I was home alone with my brother. My parents weren't home, and I can't remember where they were. I was in the bathroom and I heard the phone ringing. I thought, it's that old woman again. I heard my little brother running to the hallway. Like I said, I was in the bathroom, so I thought to myself, oh well, he can't reach it. Then I heard this horrible clattering sound. My brother then said, "Hello, hello." When I came out of the bathroom, I was surprised to see that he had pulled the phone line with enough momentum to bring the phone down from the high place I had put it. I ran straight over to him. He was lying on the floor, happily chatting away. "Yeah, sure. Come and play, yeah." I snatched the phone out of his hand, and I put it to my ear, but all I heard was a dial tone. From that day forward, my brother never jumped up and down and went crazy when the phone rang, and there were no further calls from that number either. I called it and the number is no longer in use. 7 years has passed since then, and my brother says he doesn't remember it at all. Anytime my parents or I bring it up, he always scowls and accuses us of lying. I'm worried about what might have happened. I'm worried that he's hiding something. I'm not sure if it still exists, but when I was younger, there was a phone line that you could call to speak to Rika-chan. Hello, me here again to break the fourth wall again. Here's a photo of Rika-chan. As you can see, she's a doll. She's a very popular doll in Japan. The phone line that the original poster is describing in this story was real, and it was a service where children could dial a number to speak to their favorite doll. From what I read about it, it seems like when these kids dialed, they would hear a random recorded phrase in the voice of the doll. It took some digging, but here's an example of what you might hear if you called Rika-chan's hotline. Keep your eyes on the subtitles, or wait for me at the end and I will tell you what she said. I don't know, just in case you're in the bath or something.
Hi, 私リカちゃんよ。もうそろそろあなたから電話があるんじゃないかと思って、私待ってたのよ。今日はね、とっても嬉しいお話があるのよ。
It's Rika-chan. I thought you would call soon. I was waiting for your call. So today, I want to tell you about something that made me really happy. She goes on to talk about a trip on the bullet train. I don't want to use up too much of your time and copyright and all that stuff. Link in the description below if you want to hear that whole doll phone line thing. It's quite interesting because there's a little song that might end up being stuck in your head. Anyway, as you can tell, she has a very positive and upbeat voice. Keep that in mind. Now back to the story. My sister and I used to often call the Rika-chan hotline. Rika-chan just speaks one-sidedly, and my sister and I were sat there saying, yeah, to anything she said. My sister was on the phone all the time to Rika-chan. She seemed to really enjoy it. I got bored of it. Maybe it was because I realized that Rika was saying the same things over and over. My sister was younger and was still enjoying it though. One afternoon after school, my sister was calling Rika-chan like usual, and after a few minutes, she screamed and threw the handset across the room. She ran off, seemingly frightened by something. I wanted to go after her, but first I was worried that she broke the phone, so I went over to it and picked it up. I heard Rika's voice, and I put the phone to my ear to make sure if it still worked. Your mum's gonna die. Your mum's gonna die. She was saying it again and again. I hung up the phone and ran to my sister. She was crying her eyes out, and I tried to console her. For a while, we were really scared that our mum would die. We would do everything to try and stop her leaving the house. We didn't want her to get into a car accident. Of course, our mother just laughed at us. Nothing happened to her, but that was pretty scary. So, yeah, I don't know what that was. It was around the end of summer, many years ago when this happened. I lived in a residential area, and back then I was working as a barista in a cafe. It wasn't a busy cafe. It made for a great hangout for me and my friends. I would open the shop each shift with a female co-worker. She was a great friend to me. She was always energetic and full of laughter, but one morning she seemed strangely quiet. She didn't look all that well either. I was worried about her. I asked her what was up. Something scary happened. What happened? Did you see a ghost or something? She remained silent. She had told me in the past about some creepy things that had happened to her, and I was always interested in her stories. But that day, she didn't offer to tell me anything, so I knew it must have been something bad. I was so curious, I needed to know, so I asked and I asked and I asked, until she agreed to tell me what happened. And her story went something like this. She had been on a college trip and finally arrived back at her home station. She had forgotten her key, left it at home. So, she wanted to call home to make sure that there was someone there to let her in. She used the payphone at the station to call home. This was before mobile phones were common, by the way. She said that it was very rare for there to be no one home, and usually someone answers the phone pretty much at the first ring. That was the case this time too. Someone answered after a couple of rings. "Hey, I'm by the station. I forgot my key, so please leave the door open for me. I gotta go, my bus is here. Bye." She said it was a complete one-way conversation. She got off the bus and walked home. She said that she was very tired. She finally arrived home, only to find that the door was locked. She couldn't believe it. She told them to leave the door unlocked. She went around the house, looking into the windows, trying to see if anyone was at home, because no one came to the door when she knocked on it. There was no one home. The house was still and silent. It was weird because not too long ago she was on the phone to someone. She wondered if someone was home, but she just couldn't see them from the window, or they couldn't hear her knocking. So she went to a local tobacco shop, as there was a payphone out front. She called once again, and after a few rings, someone answered. "Hey, it's me," she said, but there was nothing but silence at the other end. "Hello? Hello? Hello, it's me." The other party remained silent. Why were they being silent? She guessed that there must be some sort of phone malfunction, so she decided to head back to the house and sit outside in the hope that she might spot someone soon. She was really annoyed, but then she remembered that there was a hidden spare key outside. She got it and unlocked the door, and she was in. The house was silent. She looked around and called out, but no one replied. She checked the phone, and there appeared to be nothing wrong with it. She heard something upstairs, but when she called the names of her family members, no one answered. There was something off about the house. Something told her to leave immediately. She locked the house up and walked away from her home, freaked out. She decided to go back to the payphone outside of the tobacco shop and called her house phone just to see if someone would answer again. And someone did. She was feeling nervous, but then considered the fact that it could be someone in her family playing a prank on her. "Hello?" she said. There was no reply. "Sis, I know you're pranking me. Just answer me, damn it." Silence. "Who is it?" Silence. "Who are you? God damn it, answer me." Silence yet again. She decided to stay on the line and listen to the silence and try and figure out if she could hear anything. "I know someone's there. Who are you?" Then after a long silence, she finally got a response. "There's no one here." It was so disturbing. There was someone in the house. She slammed the handset down. She said she went straight back to her house. I was shocked by her bravery. She unlocked the door and looked around her family home. The windows and doors were all locked, and nothing appeared to be out of place, except one thing. The phone was lying on the floor, out of its cradle. Someone had been there. When she told me this, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It was about 20 years ago when this happened. I think I was in the 6th grade. My dad was working for the Coast Guard. He got transferred and had to work far from our hometown. So it was just Mum, me, and my little sister at home back then. I remember one week my school was closed in the afternoons. I forget the reason why. My little sister, who went to the same school as me, went over to her friend's house to play one afternoon, that week. My mother went out grocery shopping. In other words, I was alone. I loved it. The house was my own and it was amazing. I was eating sweets and drinking juice, watching TV at times I usually wasn't allowed to watch it. It was cool, but the novelty soon wore off. I lay down on the sofa and I started reading a comic. It was a naughty one I managed to get my hands on. I figured I would read it until Mum came home and then stash it. It was then that the phone rang. Since I was happy being king of the castle, I couldn't be bothered to answer the phone. The phone continued to ring, and it must have rang about 10 times. Just as soon as it finished, it began again. It was annoying me so much that I had to go and answer it. Hi, I'm really sorry, but Mum's not home right now. It's just... Before I could finish my sentence, a man's voice on the other end of the line interrupted me. He was talking quickly and very enthusiastically. At first, I couldn't figure out what the hell he was saying. It sounded like I was listening to some sort of monologue in a play. It sounded like gibberish at some points. But then I noticed something familiar. I was reading a comic called Bastards, and like I said, it was a naughty one. The man on the phone was reading some of the phrases and themes of the story I was just reading on the sofa. He was literally reading aloud the story I had just read. I must have gasped or something because it was as if he realized I was shocked and suddenly stopped reading. The voice the other end of the line dropped a few decibels. The cheerfulness was gone.
Kids your age shouldn't read naughty stories like that, should they?
Do you want to read more stories like that? If you do, then you deserve punishing. He said something like that. I got goosebumps and understood fear for the first time that day. I slammed the phone back into the cradle. I spun around and looked all around me. There was no figure at the window peeping in. I won't go into a detailed description of the layout of my house, but I will say that there are several spots by the windows where someone could have been watching me without me knowing. This really frightened me deep down to my core. I ran in a panic to the bathroom and I locked myself in. I cursed myself for answering the phone, and even more for telling that weird man that my mum wasn't home. I jammed my feet against the locked door and I buried my head in my hands. All the while, the phone continued to ring in the living room. Of course, there was no way that I was going to go out there and answer it. When Mum came home, I burst out of the bathroom crying, and I explained everything. She didn't really believe me. She said that it was probably just one of my school friends messing around. Well, it's 20 years on now, and the sound of the phone ringing still makes me jump. I was 21 when this happened. I was working part-time. One day I got a call on my mobile phone. As soon as I answered the call, the caller hung up. I guessed that it was just a wrong number call. I didn't really care all that much. However, one call turned into two, then two into dozens. It was relentless. Not only that, but the caller wouldn't hang up straight away anymore. There were periods of silence before I heard the dial tone, and those periods of silence increased, just like the numbers of calls did. I was convinced that it was someone pranking me. I'm a pretty stubborn guy, so I was determined to outlast whoever was doing this to me. I wouldn't be the one to blink first. I answered every call and made sure I didn't hang up first. I would get a call every 3 days or so, at first, but then it increased to every day. My enemy was just as stubborn as I was. I would get the calls at all hours of the day, when I was at work or in class. They left a message, and as you might have guessed, it was nothing but silence. My stubbornness paid off, and the calls abruptly stopped. I was really pleased with myself and happy to get back to living in peace. However, several days later, the calls I used to receive in the daytime came back at night time. The silent calls were back. This again? I thought. The calls were coming after midnight now. It would wake me up some nights. I answered one night and just shouted at the silent caller, "I've had enough of your bullshit!" and hung up. The next night, the phone rang again. "Are you fucking crazy? Enough is enough!" And after I hung up that time, I received a text message. "Then look at me." It said, "What the hell?" I didn't get it. Another text message came through. "I won't stop until you look at me." It made my blood run cold. To read that in the middle of the night was really disturbing. I started to think that this wasn't prank calls, but maybe I had a stalker. What did they mean by, "look at them"? I was freaked out. I turned my phone off and I buried my head under the covers. I woke up the next morning and checked my phone. Thankfully, there were no answer phone messages or texts. I turned my phone off at night time from that day on. Later that night, I turned off the lights in my bedroom and I picked up my phone to switch that off too, but I noticed I had a text message. "Are you going to sleep now?" How the hell was someone seeing me? My body broke out in goosebumps. I wanted to open the curtains to see if anyone was out there, but I wouldn't want them to see me freaking out. Or if there was someone out there, I didn't want them to come anywhere near my window. So, I got into bed and I turned off my phone. From the next day onwards, I began to become more frightened of being at home, and just as frightened of being outside of my home. There was nowhere for someone to hide or gain entry to my place. It simply wasn't big enough to go without being noticed. Was I being wiretapped? If that was the case, how could they have seen me? I was jumping at my own shadow, and I was keeping my phone shut off as often as I could. Then, for about a week, all the calls and texts stopped. I started to believe that it could have been someone messing with me for a laugh. I relaxed a little, and I let my guard down, and that's when the texts started up again. I had just finished work, and I was on the way home, and I checked my phone. "You work late tonight. Maybe you're doing overtime?" The text read. I am being watched. I was most scared of the phrase, "tonight." I didn't know who was watching me. The next day I was leaving the bookstore, and I got another text message. The text read, "I love that book." You're probably wondering why I let this go on for so long. I spoke to my friends and family about this situation, and they pretty much agreed that since nothing had actually happened beyond a couple of texts and a whole bunch of calls, then I shouldn't really take it all that seriously. They said that it was nothing but someone teasing me, and I was making a big deal out of nothing. Then I thought I would speak to the police, but there's a great deal of stigmatism about stalking in Japan. Would they even take me seriously? I mean, as a man complaining of stalking? That's why I didn't go to the police. I remember I lost my social life back in those days. I would do nothing more than go back and forth from my classes and to work. I didn't do what most men my age did. I lived a sheltered life. One of my friends noticed this change in me and noticed that I was never available via the phone. I thought about blocking that number, but then I thought it might make things worse for me. I didn't want this to intensify. The silent calls continued for a while, but eventually they dropped in number. After about half a year, I was able to live a normal social kind of life again. The stalker finally gave up. Was it even a stalker? It could have been a prank, I guess. Still, it freaks me out that someone was watching me and calling me all hours of the night. When I think back to those days, I get the creeps. There was an earthquake last night. They're not uncommon here. It was a 4 on the seismic scale. This is what happened to me last night, and it's really weird. I was in a deep state of sleep, only to be awoken by the sound of the phone ringing. It was in the other room charging. I didn't expect any calls, and I had the next day off work. I heard it continuously ringing, and I really didn't want to get up to see who it was. I fell back asleep, only to be woken up again by the phone ringing. It rang for about 4 or 5 rings. I snapped out of my sleepy state when I considered that a relative of mine could have been hurt. Or worse. I thought that there must be no other reason why I would be getting a call in the middle of the night. It was hardly going to be a sales call. I got up, headed into the other room, fearing the worst. I answered the phone, and it went like this. Yes, hello.
Ah, did you get up?
On the other end of the line was the voice of one of my friends who lived nearby. What do you think, you dick? What are you ringing me for? I was still half asleep, and I'm not particularly nice when I've just woken up, but then again, who is? The very second I stopped cursing him, the earthquake struck. I felt the whole house shake. Oh, damn! Did you feel that? It's an earthquake. Is your broke-ass apartment alright? I asked him, to try and lighten the mood. All I got back was a dial tone. I was left wondering, what the hell was the point of that call? I was annoyed, and I planned on letting him have it tomorrow. I stomped back to my bedroom, muttering about him. I opened the door, and I saw something shocking. The shelf which held up my magazines, journals, and most importantly, weights, had fallen due to the earthquake. It was a high shelf, and it was above the bed. Those iron weights would have landed right on my head. And maybe I wouldn't be here today if that had happened. I moved everything off the bed and got back to sleep. The next day I called my friend to thank him for that pointless call, as it might have saved my life. Here's the thing. He said he didn't even call me. Or at least he can't remember calling me. It's so weird. But I'm so grateful.